The first thing I heard was my own scream. The second was the cruelest punchline of all. I wasn't screaming in my Beatty was screaming in someone else's life. When I opened my eyes, the world didn't belong to me anymore. The ceiling was unfamiliar, high and ornate, like something ripped out of a movie set. My body felt heavier, broader. And when I looked in the mirror, staring back wasn't my face but his Adrian Cross. The villain, the ruthless, cruel heir from a best-selling American romance novel I had drunkenly mocked with my friends just last week. Adrian, the monster everyone loved to hate. The man fated to be destroyed by the novel's golden savior, Ethan Hale. And now, somehow, I was trapped in his cursed skin. I laughed at first, a bitter, hollow laugh, because what else could you do when fate decided to drop you into the body of the man everyone was waiting to see dead? I knew the story. Adrian tormented, schemed, manipulated, until Ethan finally cornered him, gun in hand, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Only now I wasn't reading the story. I was living the countdown to my own execution. The first time I saw him, it was like watching a lion walk into the room. He was everything the novel had promised and more. Tall, confident, with that effortless American boy-next-door charm wrapped in a soldier's body. His presence lit the room in a way that made people instinctively lean closer, as if the world revolved around his gravity. And me? I was supposed to be the shadow cast in his glow. When his eyes landed on me, they narrowed with the suspicion of a man who knew villains wore handsome faces. I could almost hear the author's pen scratching. Ethan Hale, the savior, meeting his destined enemy. But something happened that wasn't in the book. Instead of pushing me away, instead of pulling the trigger, Ethan saved me. It was supposed to be my end, a deal gone wrong. A rival's knife flashing under the neon haze of a New York back alley. Adrian Cross was supposed to die there. But Ethan stepped in, faster than fate itself, his hands steady, his grip iron around my bleeding body as if he couldn't let me go. "Stay with me," he commanded, voice rough, eyes burning. "You're not dying on me, Adrian. Not until you tell me the truth." The truth. He didn't mean the crimes, the betrayals, the endless sins Adrian carried. He meant something else. Something that made my heart stutter even as blood soaked my shirt. He wanted me to admit it. That I loved him. What crueler prison was there than this? To wear the skin of the villain, to know the ending carved in stone, and then to have your supposed executioner choose instead to chain himself to you with mercy. And maybe something more. Ethan hovered at the edge of my every breath, relentless in his watch. He dragged me out of shadows I'd never realized were suffocating. He forced me to sit, to eat, to heal. He mocked me with his steady patience, his damnable kindness, and the way his hand would sometimes linger just a little too long on my shoulder, grounding me like he couldn't stop himself. And I hated it. I hated how much I craved it. Because every day I stayed alive, every day he kept me tethered, I felt the novel's grip slipping. I felt the story changing. And with it, the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't meant to die at all. The world around us didn't want that possibility. The city buzzed with whispered rumors of the cross heir unraveling. My enemies circled, expecting my fall. And Ethan's allies, those who worshipped him as the perfect hero, questioned why he wasted his loyalty on a man like me. One night, cornered in a penthouse room with glass walls overlooking the city, I asked him the question that had been rotting in my throat. "Why are you doing this, Ethan? You know what I am, what I've done. You're supposed to end me, not hold me together." He stepped closer, his shadow consuming mine. For the first time, there was no savior's mask on his face, just raw truth. "Because I don't believe in villains the way the world does," he whispered. "And because I've seen the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." My blood turned to fire. My carefully built walls cracked. And in that instant, I realized this wasn't just a story about redemption. It was a story about love. A love so dangerous it defied the script. A love that might still destroy us both. And yet, when Ethan's hand found mine that night, warm and steady, I didn't pull away. For the first time since I woke up in this cursed body, I wanted to live. The next morning felt unreal. as if the night before had been some fragile dream I wasn't supposed to remember. But Ethan was there, sitting on the edge of the couch where I had passed out, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand and that insufferably calm expression on his face. "You snore when you're exhausted," he said casually, as if we were old friends, as if I hadn't once tried to ruin everything he loved at least the original Adrian had. I glared at him. "You watched me sleep?" He tilted his head. "Would you rather I left you bleeding out again? You're welcome, by the way." That was Ethan in a nutshell. He never said what you expected, never did what the script demanded. The book had painted him as a perfect knight, shining in gold. But in reality, he was sharper, rougher around the edges, almost reckless in his determination to keep me alive. And the way he looked at me sometimes like I was more than a villain, more than a burden, it was dangerous. The weeks that followed blurred together. Ethan dragged me into his orbit like gravity, whether I wanted it or not. He took me to a safe house in Brooklyn, hidden behind the skeleton of an old bookstore. He cooked like a soldier, efficient, no nonsense, but somehow always satisfying. He patched my wounds, refused to let me vanish into self-pity, and when my enemies came sniffing around, he was a shield that never cracked. But nothing unsettled me more than the small things. The way he'd push a cup of tea toward me without asking. The way his laughter filled the room, genuine and unrestrained, cutting through the ice that clung to my borrowed bones. The way his hand would brush mine when we passed plates or documents across the table, lingering too long to be accidental. It was those moments, not the battles, that made my chest ache. One evening, rain pounded against the windows, drowning the city in silver streaks. I sat at the table, staring at old newspapers about Adrian's crimes, fraud, extortion, threats, all inked in bold headlines. My hands shook. No matter how much I tried to convince myself I wasn't him, the world didn't care. The world saw Adrian Cross, and the world wanted him buried. Ethan appeared behind me, his presence a steady weight. He didn't say anything at first, just reached out, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. That simple contact burned hotter than any wound I'd ever taken. "You think these pages define you?" he finally asked. I swallowed hard. "They do. They're the only proof anyone has of who I am, of what I've done." He moved closer, his voice low, dangerous. "Then write new pages. Prove them wrong. Or don't. But don't sit here pretending you don't have a choice." I turned to him, and for a moment we were face to face, close enough to taste the electricity between us. His eyes held no judgment, no pity, just raw conviction. And for the first time I let myself want. But wanting came with a price. The Cross family empire didn't sleep. My so-called allies smelled weakness. They knew something had changed in Mesamething, softer, less ruthless. That night, a message arrived, slipped under the door, scrawled in blood-red ink. "Villains don't get second chances. Neither do traitors." Ethan read it, jaw tightening. "They're closing in." I laughed bitterly. "Good. Let them. Maybe this ends the way it was supposed to." He slammed his fist on the table, startling me. "No, I'm not letting you go. Do you hear me? Not until you admit it." My chest constricted. "Admit what?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he grabbed my wrist, pulling me up until I was pressed against his chest, his breath hot against my ear. "That you're mine," he whispered. The world stopped. My heart hammered against ribs that didn't feel like mine. His grip was steady, not cruel, protective, claiming, terrifying in its gentleness. I could have denied it. I could have shoved him away, wrapped myself in the villain's mask again. But instead, I stayed frozen, trembling, because the truth was bleeding out of me, raw and undeniable. I wanted to be his. Danger followed us like a shadow. A week later, they struck. Gunfire shattered the quiet of the safe house. Ethan shoved me behind him without hesitation, his body a wall of steel as bullets tore through shelves and shattered glass. He fought like a man who had nothing to lose, every punch and kick fueled by sheer refusal to let me go. And I, Adrian, the villain, hid. Shame clawed at me as I cowered, watching the savior risk his life for mine. The script was mocking me again. I wasn't supposed to be rescued. I was supposed to die. When it was over, when the attackers lay unconscious or fled into the night, Ethan turned on me. His shirt was torn, blood staining his arm, but his eyes blazed with fury. You think you're worthless? You think hiding makes you less of a target? Adrian, you're the reason I fight. Do you get that? You matter. My throat closed up. The villain wasn't meant to matter. And yet, to him I did. Later, when silence returned, I found him on the rooftop, sitting under the bruised purple sky of dawn. His wounds were bandaged, his hair damp with sweat, but he still looked like he belonged to some higher world I could never touch. I sat beside him anyway. Why? I asked, the word fragile in the morning air. Why not let me go? Why fight so hard for someone who doesn't deserve it? He turned to me, his gaze unflinching. Because I don't save people who deserve it. I save people who need it. I let out a broken laugh. And what if I can't give you what you want? He leaned in then, close enough that his breath brushed my lips. His voice was barely more than a whisper. Then I'll wait. Until you can. The sunrise bled gold across the city, and for the first time, I dared to hope that maybe my story wasn't doomed to end in blood. But hope was a fragile thing. The city wasn't done with us. The Cross Empire wanted me silenced, and Ethan's allies wanted me gone. We were trapped between two worlds, neither willing to claim us. And yet, as Ethan's hand found mine under the table that night, fingers threading with mine like it was the most natural thing in the world, I realized something terrifying. For him, I would risk everything, even if it meant rewriting the ending fate had carved in stone. The fracture line appeared slowly, like cracks spreading across a frozen lake. At first it was invisible, buried under routine. Ethan dragging me out of bed when nightmares clawed at my chest, me muttering insults I didn't mean while he smirked and shoved a plate of food in front of me. On the surface, we were steady. But beneath, tension, secrets, and the unspoken truth neither of us dared to let spill. It started with the phone call. Ethan left the safe house one evening, answering a secure line in clipped words, his face tight. He thought I wasn't listening. He thought I was too tired to notice. But I caught every word. Yes, he's alive. No, I don't trust him. Because if he dies, we lose leverage. Leverage. The word cut deeper than any blade. I wanted to storm into the room, scream at him, demand to know if I was just a pawn in his endless war. But my feet wouldn't move. My chest constricted. Because wasn't that the truth? Wasn't that what the villain was always meant to be useful until discarded? When he came back, his smile was tired but gentle, like always. I forced myself to match it, though something inside me had already started to splinter. The following days pressed down like a storm. My so-called allies moved faster. Old business partners of Adrian's came crawling from the woodwork, some begging me to return to power, others threatening to bury me if I didn't. One night, I found an envelope slipped under the door again. This one carried no threats, just a photograph. Me and Ethan on the rooftop, dawn breaking behind us, his hand resting on mine. The caption scrawled beneath, "Even saviors can be broken. Tell us when to strike." My stomach dropped. They weren't after me. They were after him. For hours I sat with that photo clutched in my hand, every nerve screaming. If I stayed, Ethan would bleed for me until there was nothing left. If I left, maybe the story would reset, maybe he'd survive the way the novel intended. But I couldn't move. I couldn't walk away from the only person who had ever seen through the villain's mask and chosen to stay. The breaking point came during the ambush. We were returning from a rare night out at a dingy diner where Ethan forced me to eat apple pie because you can't live in America and not love this. We laughed too much, spoke too freely, like two people not hunted by half the city. For a moment, I believed in the impossible. Then the alley exploded with gunfire. Figures emerged from the shadows, faces hidden, weapons raised. I knew the Madrian's men, my men. They weren't here for me. They were here for him. "Step away from Hale," one of them barked, "or we cut him down where he stands." Ethan pushed me behind him instinctively, his body a wall. My heart screamed in protest. Couldn't let him shield me again. Not this time. I stepped forward, hands raised, voice raw. Stop. You want me, not him. Leave him out of this. They laughed. You're not the Adrian we follow. You're weak. He made you weak. And then they opened fire. The world spun into chaos, Ethan tackling me to the ground, bullets sparking against metal, my own breath ragged in my throat. He fought like hell, dragging me through the shadows until we collapsed behind a dumpster, both of us bruised, bloodied, gasping. You idiot! He hissed, pressing a hand to my wound. Why would you step in front of me? I laughed, broken. Because I'd rather die than watch you bleed for me again. His hand stilled, his eyes wide, as if I'd just confessed something neither of us were ready to face. But there was no time. Sirens wailed in the distance, scattering the attackers. We were alive, barely, but the damage was done. Back at the safe house, silence stretched between us like a blade. Ethan paced, furious, while I sat slumped on the couch, bleeding through my shirt. Do you get it now? He snapped. This is why I can't let you out of my sight. You're reckless, I'm in love with you. The words tore out before I could stop them, raw and jagged, echoing in the cramped room. Ethan froze. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then he turned, his expression unreadable, eyes dark and burning. Say it again. I swallowed, chest heaving. I love you. I don't know if it's mine or Adrian's or something twisted between us, but it's real. It's the only real thing I've felt since waking up in this cursed body. And it terrifies me because it means if you die for me, I won't survive it. He moved then, slow, deliberate, until he was standing over me. His hand lifted, brushing against my jaw, gentler than I'd ever known a touch could be. You think I don't know? He murmured. You think I've been fighting this hard just for leverage? No, Adrian. I've been fighting because I can't lose you either. And before I could breathe, his lips were on mine. The kiss was rough, desperate, years of anger and longing and denial colliding in one shattering moment. My hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, terrified he'd vanish if I let go. He tasted like fire and rain, like salvation and damnation all at once. When we finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, he whispered the words that rewrote my world. You're not the villain to me. You never were. But the universe wasn't merciful enough to let us bask in that fragile happiness. The very next day, the council, the shadow organization backing Ethan, summoned him. They'd learned of his defiance, his refusal to hand me over. To them, I was still the villain, still a threat too dangerous to leave alive. Bring him in, they demanded, or we'll come for both of you. Ethan told me everything, his jaw tight. They'll never stop, Adrian. Not until they erase you. I laughed bitterly. So this is it. The hero forced to choose between his world and the monster he's chained himself to. He caught my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his gaze. Don't you dare call yourself that again. You're not a monster. You're mine. And in that moment I knew. The climax wasn't about whether I lived or died. It was about whether I could finally believe I deserved to love him back, even if it meant burning down the script fate had written. The council did not wait. 3 nights after Ethan confessed he couldn't lose me, the safe house was compromised. I should have expected the whispers, the tightening circle around us, the phone calls that ended abruptly whenever I entered the room. But knowing didn't soften the blow when the door exploded off its hinges and armed men poured in. Ethan reacted first. He always did. He grabbed me by the arm, yanking me behind him as bullets shattered the shelves, as smoke and fire swallowed the air. His gun barked once, twice, sending intruders sprawling. But there were too many. Go! He roared, shoving me toward the back exit. No! My throat ripped raw. Not without you. He spun on me, eyes blazing with a fury that was half love, half desperation. Adrian, listen to me. If they take you, it's over. They'll erase you. Run. But I couldn't. My body refused. I'd lived my whole second life terrified of dying again. But in that instant, the idea of living without him was worse. So I did the only thing I could. I stepped in front of him. The gunfire stopped as abruptly as it had started. A dozen council agents surrounded us, weapons raised. At their center stood a man in a tailored suit, his expression carved from stone. "Ethan Hale," he said, his voice cold, authoritative. "Step away from him. Hand over cross, and your loyalty to the council will be restored." Ethan's grip on my wrist tightened. "I told you already. I'm not handing him over." The man's gaze shifted to me, sharp as a knife. "And you, Adrian Cross, do you even understand the damage you've caused? The blood on your hands? You're a stain that cannot be washed clean. Why fight so hard to cling to a life that isn't yours?" Every word struck deep, because they were words I'd whispered to myself in the dark. But then Ethan's voice cut through the silence, steady and unyielding. "Because he's not the man you think he is. He's not the villain anymore. And I'll burn this whole damn council down before I let you touch him." The agents bristled, guns rising. The man's eyes narrowed. "Then you've chosen treason." Ethan didn't flinch. "No, I've chosen love. They took us anyway. We fought God, we fought, but even Ethan couldn't hold off an army. They dragged us into separate vans, ripped apart the fragile world we'd built." I caught his eyes through the bars of the cage, his face bloodied but still burning with defiance. "Hold on," he shouted as they slammed the doors. "I'll find you." And then the world went dark. The council's prison was nothing like the novels had described. It wasn't gothic or dramatis, it was sterile, clinical, a place where men were reduced to files and numbers. They chained me to a chair in a white room, stripped of identity, stripped of name. "Adrian Cross," the interrogator said, flipping through a folder. "You are guilty of extortion, manipulation, and conspiracy. Do you deny it?" I laughed bitterly. Would it matter if I did? He ignored me. "Ethan Hale has risked his career, his life, his reputation. For you. Do you truly believe you are worth that sacrifice?" The words sank like acid. I wanted to scream no. I wanted to protect Ethan by admitting it was all a lie. But when I closed my eyes, I saw his hand cupping my face, his lips on mine, his voice whispering, "You're not the villain to me." "Yes," I said finally, my voice breaking. "I am worth it, because he believes I am. And I won't betray that." The interrogator's eyes narrowed. "Then you've sealed your fate." Days blurred into nights. They kept me caged, isolated, waiting for me to crack. I thought I would. I thought the loneliness would devour me. But then I heard it. A commotion in the hallway. Shouts. Gunfire. And then his voice. "Adrian." My heart nearly burst. The door slammed open, and there he was, Ethan, bruised, battered, but unstoppable, his gun smoking, his chest heaving. He looked at me like a man starved finally finding water. "You came?" I whispered, choking back tears. "Of course I came," he growled, breaking my chains with bloodied hands. "Did you really think I'd let them take you from me?" When I collapsed into his arms, it wasn't weakness. It was surrender. We didn't escape easily. Sirens wailed, boots thundered. We fought through corridors drenched in red light, side by side, our breaths ragged, our movements desperate but in sync, as if fate itself couldn't pry us apart. At one point, pinned down by gunfire, I pressed my back to his, my hands shaking around a weapon I barely knew how to use. "You still think I'm not a villain?" I shouted over the chaos. He laughed, harsh and wild. "If you are, then I guess I'm the fool who fell in love with one." Something in me cracked open at those words. I wasn't Adrian anymore. I wasn't the villain or the victim or the pawn. I was just his. And for the first time, that was enough. We made it out by the skin of our teeth. A stolen car, a storm-soaked highway, headlights blurring into eternity. Ethan's hands were steady on the wheel, but his eyes kept flicking to me, as if to make sure I was really there. "You're safe now," he said, voice hoarse. "I promise." I turned to him, my chest aching with a truth I could no longer hold back. "No, Ethan, we're safe, because I finally get it. I'm not living someone else's story anymore. I'm living ours." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. full of everything we'd survived, everything we'd confessed, everything still waiting ahead. And when his hand found mine across the console, warm and unshakable, I knew we had burned the script. We had written a new ending, together. But even freedom came with a price. The council wasn't gone. Adrian's empire wasn't gone. We were fugitives now, hunted by both. Our love wasn't the happy ever after of a fairytale. It was raw, fragile, dangerous. Every day could be our last. And yet, as we holed up in a small cabin miles from the city, sharing stolen moments of laughter, patching each other's wounds, learning what it meant to simply exist in each other's arms, I realized something that left me breathless. I didn't care, because for the first time since waking up in this cursed body, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of not having enough time to love him the way he deserved. The world would come for us again. I knew that, but as Ethan pulled me into his arms that night, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that promised more than words ever could, I allowed myself the luxury of hope. Maybe we couldn't escape the fire, but maybe, just maybe, we could survive it together. The cabin didn't last. It was never meant to. Deep down, both of us knew it was a borrowed dream, fragile as glass, waiting for the world to shatter it. And it did. One morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps crunching outside. Not Ethan's were heavy, deliberate. These were too many, too light, circling like wolves. I sat up in bed, my chest seizing. Before I could speak, the window exploded inward, a flashbang rolling across the floor. Ethan was on his feet instantly, gun drawn, dragging me down behind the bed as the room filled with smoke. His voice was steady, a lifeline. "Stay with me. No matter what happens, stay." The council had come. The final showdown wasn't cinematic, it was chaos. The air reeked of gunpowder, walls splintered under bullets, and the cabin that had held our laughter burned around us. Ethan fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. And I fought too, not well, not clean, but hard enough to matter. At one point, a council agent cornered me, gun pressed to my temple. The villain in me wanted to sneer, to go out with pride. But the man I had become? He thought only of Ethan. So I did the unthinkable. I begged. "Please," I rasped, blood in my mouth. "Don't hurt him. Take me, just not him." The agent laughed, cruel and sure. "He'd burn the world for you. That's his weakness. And yours." But before the trigger could pull, Ethan was there, fury incarnate, ripping the man away, his fists slamming down with a violence I'd never seen before. His voice cracked as he shouted, "No one touches him. No one." And in that moment I understood. We weren't hero and villain anymore. We were just two men clawing for a future the world didn't want us to have. The council leader appeared at last, stepping through the smoke like a shadow made flesh. The same man who had told Ethan to betray me. His gun was steady, his eyes colder than winter. "This ends now," he said. "Hale, step aside. You can still salvage your life. But if you stay with him, you'll fall too." Ethan raised his weapon, planting himself between me and the man. "Then I'll fall." The leader's gaze flicked to me. "And you, Cross? Do you really want this? To drag him down with you?" I shook, torn in two. Every instinct screamed at me to surrender, to let Ethan go, to free him from the weight of me. But then Ethan's hand reached back, finding mine, gripping tight. His voice was soft, steady, everything I'd ever needed. "We fall together, or not at all." And in that moment I made my choice. I stepped out from behind him. The leader sneered. "So the villain finally grows a spine." "Not a villain," I said, my voice steady for the first time since I'd woken in this cursed body. "Not anymore. Not to him." I raised my weapon. My hands shook, my heart thundered. But Ethan's presence was a tether, anchoring me. And together we fired. The leader fell. The room went silent, save for the crackle of flames. The council agents scattered, leaderless, their empire crumbling in that single heartbeat. And just like that, it was over. We stumbled out into the night, the cabin collapsing behind us, ashes raining like snow. I leaned against Ethan, my body broken, but my heart was alive. He held me close, his voice hoarse. It's done. You're free. I laughed, a ragged sound. No, we're free. For the first time, I believed it. The aftermath was not easy. Freedom never is. We ran for weeks, across state lines, through motels and borrowed cars, chased by ghosts of a life we had burned. But the council never regrouped. Adrian's empire fractured, and slowly, impossibly, the world loosened its grip. One evening, sitting on the hood of a rusted truck under a blanket of stars, Ethan turned to me. So, he said, a crooked smile on his lips. What now? Do we keep running forever? I looked at him, really looked at the scars, the exhaustion, the stubborn fire in his eyes. And for the first time, the answer didn't scare me. No, I whispered. We start over. Together. Somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere we can just be. He reached over, threading his fingers through mine. Adrian Cross, reformed villain, running a coffee shop in some small town. That's a sight I'd pay to see. I laughed, leaning into him. And Ethan Hale, savior of the city, pouring lattes for old ladies. That's the real comedy. Hey! He nudged, his voice softening. As long as you're there, I'll pour lattes for the rest of my life. We did find that town, eventually. A quiet place by the coast, where no one asked questions and the ocean drowned out the past. We rented a tiny apartment above a bakery, painted the walls ourselves, argued about furniture until we gave up and bought a couch too ugly to be legal. And in the mornings, when sunlight spilled across his bare shoulders, when his arms curled around me like the world couldn't touch us, I realized something I'd never dared to hope for. I was home, not in Adrian's mansion, not in the council's prison, not in the pages of a book written to end in tragedy. Home was him, Ethan, the man who refused to let me die until I admitted I loved him, the man who made me believe I wasn't a villain after all. Years later, people would still whisper about Adrian Cross and Ethan Hale, the villain who vanished, the savior who betrayed his masters. But those were just stories. The truth was quieter, simpler. Two men sitting in a sunlit kitchen, drinking coffee too bitter for most, laughing over burned toast, stealing kisses when they thought no one was watching. Two men who had rewritten their ending, not with heroics or redemption, but with love. And when Ethan pressed his lips to mine one morning, smiling into the kiss, I whispered the words I had once thought I'd never be brave enough to say. I love you. Always. His eyes softened, his thumb brushing my cheek. Took you long enough. And that was it. No explosions, no battles, no council. Just us. Just love. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.